consent request.
Gentleman's recognized.
So I've got 4 documents I'd like to introduce into the record. The first one is Jeffrey Epstein's 6 story played out for years in plain sight. And Acosta is quoted in here saying, "I was told Epstein belonged to intelligence and to leave it alone." The second document is entitled, "What Epstein's Bodyguard Warned About His CIA Connections." The third document is from Fox Digital. It's titled, "Epstein's Private Calendar Reveals Planned Meetings with Obama Admin Official CIA Chief." And the last document is Wall Street Journal article that highlights Ehud Barak's 36 meetings with Jeffrey Epstein. He was the former Prime Minister of Israel and head of military intelligence for Israel. It may have held that title when he met Epstein, and then, yes.
Without objection, the gentleman will hold for a second. The gentleman from Maryland is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one UC request. This is Judge Engelmeyer's decision from August in U.S. versus Epstein, stating the government's 100,000 pages of Epstein files dwarfs the 70-odd pages of Epstein grand jury materials.
Without objection, the gentleman from Kentucky is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Patel, I watched some of your Senate hearing yesterday when Senator Kennedy asked you, "You've seen most of the files. Who, if anyone, did Epstein traffic these women to besides himself?" You replied, according to the transcript, "There is no credible information that he trafficked them to anyone else." You also said somewhere in the hearing and here today that the problem is that the case files are constrained by limited search warrants from 2006 to 2007, and that the non-prosecution agreement hamstrung future investigations. Those constraints only apply to the Southern District of Florida. They do not apply to the Southern District of New York, the location of the 2019 sex trafficking indictment, which produced many things, including a series of FD 302 documents. According to victims who cooperated with the FBI in that investigation, these documents in FBI possession, your possession, detail at least 20 men, including Mr. Jess Staley, CEO of Barclays Bank, who Jeffrey Epstein trafficked victims to, victims including minors, such as Virginia Roberts Giuffre, may she rest in peace. That list also includes at least 19 other individuals, one Hollywood producer worth a few $100 million, one royal prince, one high-profile individual in the music industry, one very prominent banker, one high-profile government official, one high-profile former politician, one owner of a car company in Italy, one rock star, one magician, at least 6 billionaires, including a billionaire from Canada. We know these people exist in the FBI files, the files that you control. I don't know exactly who they are, but the FBI does. Have you launched any investigations into any of these people, and have you seen these 302 documents?
Sir, I have asked my FBI agents to review the entirety of the Epstein files and bring forth any credible information, and we're working with Congress not only to divulge that information and produce it to you, but any investigations that arise from any credible investigation will be brought. There have been no new materials brought to me launching a new indictment.
So is the loophole here, or is it your assertion that these victims aren't credible, that the 302s maybe didn't produce credible statements that rise to a probable cause?
It's not my assertion, sir. It's the assertion of 2 different United States attorneys' offices from 3 separate administrations who investigated those same materials in lifetime.
Are the 302 documents in the FBI's possession?
They reviewed all that, yes, sir.
And so have you reviewed those 302 documents where the victims name the people who victimized them?
If I personally know, but the FBI has.
So how can you sit here and in front of the Senate and say there are no names?
I said
I named one today.
I said we are not in the practice at the Department of Justice FBI of releasing victims' names. That is not what we do. We are also not in the habit of releasing incredible information. That's not what we do. But multiple authorities have looked at the entirety of what we have.
Okay, I got to move on here. Were you present when the AG had the White House event when she released the binders to the social media influencers?
I was, yes.
So if you're willing to meet with social media influencers who stood to benefit from the sensational and sad stories of these victims, will you meet with the victims as well?
The FBI will meet with anyone who has new information.
Will you personally meet with them?
The FBI and the professionals who are handling the cases will.
Were you instructed that it was important to release the documents to the Oversight Committee on the day of my introduction of the discharge petition to release these files?
I don't know what day that was, so no.
Well, they were released that day, and there were victims' names who weren't redacted because they were in such a rush, and the victims are not happy about that. Have you investigated any of the CIA connections? Have you seen the CIA file on Jeffrey Epstein? And if you wanted to see it, would they show it to you?
Well, I can speak for the FBI, and that's presuming there's a CIA case file, and I've reviewed everything that the interagency, not I, the FBI, that was provided to us.
Would you be willing to look at the CIA file on Jeffrey Epstein?
If there is such a file, and if it has not already been turned over to the FBI will look at any new investigative leads.
Have you made any progress on the pipe bomb investigation January 6th? And have you made any progress on the motive of the Las Vegas shooter?
As to the first, it's an ongoing investigation, and we have made progress. As to the second, sir, I'll have to get back to you.
All right, thank you. I yield back.
Mr. Chairman, I have a unanimous.
On September 18th, 2025, at exactly 3:46 and 52 seconds p.m., room 2140, one of the Rayburn House office building, was still bathed in that weary, golden late afternoon light that slips between the tall sash windows, grazes the century-old oak paneling, glints off the worn gilt moldings, and finally dies on the deep red carpets trodden for generations by the cowboy boots of politicians and the stiletto heels of lobbyists. The journalists in attendance were half dozing over their notepads. The C-SPAN cameras rolled. On autopilot, staffers idly scrolled their phones, waiting for yet another hearing titled, FBI Practices Regarding the Protection of Sex Trafficking Victims, to end. No one, absolutely no one, suspected that in less than 2 minutes the political history of the United States was about to tip over forever, that the fragile balance between power, secrecy, and truth was about to be shattered in 43 seconds flat. At exactly 3:47 p.m. the side door opened without a sound and Thomas Massie walked in, 54 years old, lean silhouette of an MIT physics professor turned politician, impeccable light blue shirt, sober tie, thin wire-rimmed glasses, looking like a man who had just solved an equation everyone else had been failing for 20 years. Carrying in his right hand a simple black leather briefcase that contained no classified documents, no stolen evidence, only the Constitution of the United States, and the absolute certainty that Article 1, Section 6, the speech or debate clause, was the nuclear weapon no one had dared arm since 1789. He set the briefcase on the lectern, opened it slowly, took out a navy blue cardboard folder, looked up, and locked eyes with Kash Patel, the recently appointed FBI director sitting at the witness table in a perfectly tailored navy suit, gold badge catching the fluorescent light, still convinced this would be just another routine day. Behind him, 3 Department of Justice lawyers clutched briefcases stuffed with executive privilege claims, classification defenses, and legal precedents that, in a matter of moments, would prove as useful as a paper umbrella in a hurricane. In the Republican rows, a few members dozed or checked their watches. The Democrats, by contrast, sat wide-eyed because they could feel something coming. In the public gallery, a handful of Epstein victims' attorneys, they're out of habit, clutched their files like talismans, and a woman in her 50s with a faint scar on her temple, the souvenir of an assault that had never been punished, whispered to the person beside her, "Something's about to happen. I can feel it." Massie adjusted his microphone. The silence fell like a blade, the way the sound drops in a movie theater right before the first gunshot in a Western. He took a slow breath, and at exactly 3:47 and 34 seconds p.m. he spoke, his voice calm but carrying months of contained fury. Director Patel, today I want to discuss the FBI's continued obstruction regarding Jeffrey Epstein's client list and your agency's systematic protection of credibly accused sexual predators. Patel leaned toward his microphone with the practiced routine of a man who had answered the same question 100 times. Representative, The FBI continues to investigate all credible allegations according to established legal protocols while respecting ongoing prosecutorial considerations and victim privacy. Massie gave a joyless half-smile and replied, "Legal protocols, perfect. Then allow me to refresh your memory, Director. I have documented proof that victims' attorneys have submitted to your agency at least 20 credible allegations of rape and sex trafficking involving public figures. Those allegations are recorded in your FD 302 forms. Can you tell the American people, right here, what you have done with those files?" The words 302 landed like a knife thrust. The lawyers behind Patel stiffened. FD 302s are the FBI's internal interview reports. Massie wasn't throwing out vague accusations. He knew the exact internal references. He had the numbers. He had everything. Patel tried to keep his composure. "Sir, I cannot comment on specific investigative materials or ongoing cases that might—" Massie cut him off, voice suddenly harder, lower, more dangerous. "Victim privacy, Director? Is it the victim's privacy you're protecting, or that of wealthy predators who continue to walk free while your agency refuses to investigate?" A leaden silence. The C-SPAN cameras zoomed in on Patel's face. The journalist snapped awake. Phones began vibrating in pockets, and at 3:47 and 58 seconds p.m. Thomas Massie pulled the pin on the grenade that would blow everything apart. A constitutional grenade so powerful that in less than a minute it would crack the very foundations of American power and remind every soul in that room that sometimes the most devastating truth requires no gun, no army, no money, just one man standing at a microphone and 6 words written 250 years ago. "Director Patel, Speaker Johnson has decided that wealthy men who flew to what the victims themselves call Rape Island deserve protection from unsubstantiated allegations." The phrase Rape Island detonated in the room like a cluster bomb, muffled gasps, chairs scraping, phones yanked from pockets at lightning speed. Republican staffers turned ashen. One member whispered, "Oh my God," loud enough for the microphones to catch it. Massie didn't blink and kept going. "The problem is that the provisions the Speaker wants to shield will protect guilty men who have never been investigated despite credible allegations of rape and sexual abuse of minors." A cathedral-like silence fell. Then he dropped the second warhead. "And Speaker Johnson changed his position because President Trump personally ordered him to. This Speaker will always do exactly what President Trump wants, even if it means shielding credibly accused pedophiles from any form of accountability." The room exploded. Cries. Stifled new Republican members staring at one another in stunned horror. A woman in the gallery burst into sobs, a survivor. The C-SPAN cameras caught everything. Faces collapsing, hands trembling, eyes darting away. Patel tried to respond, but his voice cracked slightly. "Representative, the FBI investigates all allegations without political consideration." Massie cut him off again. Louder, colder. "Really? Then explain why Lauren Boebert, Nancy Mace, and Marjorie Taylor Greene could never be flipped. Leadership tried everything to make them fold, to get their names off the disclosure petition, but they refused. They held the line." A thunder of murmurs. 3 of the most combative Republican women had just been publicly saluted for their defiance. Their teams were flooded with messages. Social media erupted in real time. Hashtag Massie names shot upward like a rocket. 80% of Republicans want these files released. Massie continued. 20% don't care. Literally no one in our base is saying don't release them. Yet Republican leadership is choosing to protect wealthy predators instead of delivering justice to their victims. Every sentence was a hammer blow. Every word shattered months of carefully maintained lies. Networks began cutting into regular programming one after another. CNN flashed breaking. GOP congressman accuses Trump and Speaker of protecting Epstein clients. Fox News, panicking, hunted for an angle. Reporters in the room were already firing off dispatches. The phones of Speaker Johnson's advisors vibrated so violently the buzzing was audible in the silence. Frantic texts flew. "He's destroying everything. He just said Trump is protecting pedophiles. What the hell do we do?" The faces of Republican members drained from white to gray. Some stared at their shoes as if hoping to vanish into them. Others glared at Massie with a mixture of hatred and terror because they finally understood. This man hadn't come to negotiate. He had come to burn the house down so the truth could rise from the ashes. And at 3:47 and 58 seconds p.m., he lifted his eyes to Patel and uttered the words that would go down as the most dangerous ever spoken in a congressional hearing room. Words so simple, yet so absolute that they would make the empire of secrecy tremble and remind everyone present that democracy, when defended without compromise, still possesses weapons even. The most powerful cannot disarm. Director Patel, since the FBI categorically refuses to investigate credible allegations and the leadership of my own party, the Republican Party, deliberately chooses to shield accused rapists, only one final option remains to us. One single option, but it is constitutional and utterly unstoppable. He paused a long, crushing silence, so thick it felt as though an invisible guillotine blade hung over every head in room 2141. Then he dropped the nuclear bomb, slowly, deliberately, the way a man lays down a truth he has carried for months. Reading the names from the floor of the House of Representatives, one collective intake of breath swept the room, as though the very air had died, as though every soul present understood in a fraction of a second that history had just tipped over forever. Because you know as well as I do, Director, Massie continued in a voice that suddenly seemed to come from very far away. Anything spoken from this exact lectern enjoys total and absolute immunity under Article 1, Section 6 of the United States Constitution. No legal recourse, no censorship, no possible deletion, ever. The instant a name is read from the floor of the House of Representatives, it becomes part of the permanent public congressional record, carved into the marble of history, forever, for all eternity. Patel went white in a single heartbeat. His skin turned the color of ash. The lawyers behind him appeared to age 10 years in 10 seconds, their briefcases stuffed with executive privilege claims and classification shields suddenly as ridiculous as children's toys in the face of a warhead. And it can happen tomorrow. Massie went on in a voice that was calm, almost gentle, almost tender, or the day after, or next week, or any day I choose. If the Department of Justice keeps refusing to release these files, nothing, absolutely nothing, neither you, nor the President, nor the Speaker, nor any court in this land will be able to stop me from walking up to this very podium and reading those names, one by one, slowly, clearly, before the American people, live, in front of millions of witnesses. 43 seconds, not one more, not one less. 43 seconds in which Thomas Massie had just reminded the entire world that the Constitution of the United States contains a weapon far more powerful than any top-secret classification, any executive privilege, any backroom deal among the powerful. Republicans began fleeing the room. First one, then 2, then 5, then 10. Some stood so fast their chairs toppled backward. Some were practically running down the corridors. To stay meant making a choice. Either stand with Massie and risk the total destruction of their own party, or publicly oppose transparency and appear to the nation as the direct accomplices of pedophiles. Neither option was politically survivable. In Speaker Johnson's office, it was absolute apocalypse. Advisors screaming into phones, lawyers confirming the unthinkable in trembling voices. Yes, Massie was right. Yes, he could do it. Yes, no one, absolutely no one, could legally stop him. The Democrats sat frozen in place, some with tears in their eyes. Their 10-year fight had just been taken up and won by the man they had always regarded as their worst political enemy. In the public gallery, the woman with the faint scar on her temple rose slowly, very slowly, and began to applaud. One person at first, then 2, then 10, then the entire gallery. The applause rang through the chamber like a solemn death knell. The sergeants at arms didn't know what to do. Some lowered their heads. Others were crying too. C-SPAN cut to a wide shot. You could see Massie standing alone, perfectly calm, almost serene at the lectern, while behind him the Republican rows emptied at lightning speed like a theater evacuating before the fire. And at exactly 3:48 and 17 seconds p.m., the 43-second clip was already everywhere, shared tens of millions of times, commented on, subtitled in every language, translated, becoming in a matter of minutes the exact moment, the precise tipping point when one man, armed only with the Constitution, had made the empire of secrecy totter, when truth, raw, brutal, and uncompromising, had finally found a voice brave enough to speak it aloud and force the entire world to hear it. In just 48 hours, Thomas Massie's threat had already done more for transparency on the Epstein files than 20 full years of endless judicial investigations, sensational investigative reports, award-winning documentaries, furious protests outside federal courthouses, petitions signed by millions, and tears shed by victims who had been sworn would be silenced forever. Social media was completely overwhelmed in an unprecedented wave. Hashtag Massie 43 seconds became, within hours, the most shared hashtag in recent platform history, surpassing even the records of the biggest global events. Memes proliferated at breakneck speed. Massie as Oppenheimer with the caption, "Now I am become truth, the destroyer of secrets," as Terminator in dark glasses with the line, "I'll be back with names." As Moses on Mount Sinai parting the Red Sea of state secrets while waves of top-secret classifications fell back before him, as a Jedi Knight wielding the Constitution like a lightsaber, as John Wick with the text, they took his silence. Big mistake. Creators competed in imagination, and every new image was reposted millions of times. Every single news channel, without exception, ran the video on a loop, red breaking, banners flashing nonstop. Constitutional scholars paraded across the sets, former federal prosecutors, Harvard professors, retired judges, all repeating the exact same terrifying sentence, word for word, like a mantra of helplessness. Yes, he can do it. Yes, it is completely unstoppable. No, absolutely no one can legally stop him. At the Department of Justice, the lights stayed on all night. Dozens of the country's finest lawyers, the very ones who had spent their careers building paper fortresses around state secrets, frantically hunted for a loophole, a forgotten precedent, a dusty ruling, anything that could neutralize Massie, but they all came back to the same conclusion, faces ashen. There is nothing, absolutely nothing. The speech or debate clause is an absolute fortress in the Capitol corridors. The wildest rumors circulated, first in whispers, then louder and louder. Some swore Massie already had the full list printed on heavy paper locked in his personal safe. Others insisted he would start with the most explosive names to maximize impact. Still others claimed he had already set a date, October 1st at 10 a.m. sharp, and that the sergeants-at-arms had been told to prepare the chamber for an extraordinary session. The elected officials whose names might appear in the files no longer slept. Some booked flights to faraway destinations the very next morning. Others hired crisis management firms at astronomical rates, spin doctors, attorneys specializing in high-profile sex scandals. Political donations froze solid. Promise checks stayed in drawers. Donors panicked, screaming into their phones to their advisors, "Pull everything, burn everything. I don't want my name anywhere near this." Speaker Mike Johnson's office turned into a war bunker, doors double-locked, encrypted. Phones, calls pouring in from everywhere. Do something, pay him off, threaten him, expel him from the party, strip his committees, anything. But every time the lawyers, faces defeated, repeated the same phrase like a death sentence. "We can't do anything. He is constitutionally untouchable. He can read whatever he wants, whenever he wants, and no one on earth can stop him." And yet the threat alone was enough. It acted like acid eating through the thickest walls. Within 48 hours, leaks began slipping out of the DOJ, first tentative, then increasingly precise. The release of a completely unredacted version of the Epstein files was now under serious consideration at the highest level. Within 72 hours, 3 major outlets, The Washington Post, The New York Times, and CNN, simultaneously confirmed that ultra-secret negotiations were taking place between Republican leadership and Thomas Massie's office. Some even spoke of a last-minute deal to publish the entire files before the fatal date to avoid the public reading. The threat had worked. It had succeeded where decades of legal battles, tears, and despair had failed. It had brought the powerful to their knees before 6 words written in 1787 by men in powdered wigs who could never have imagined that one day, in 2025, Those 6 words would become the most terrifying weapon in the entire republic. And all across the country, millions of ordinary people, in their living rooms, in their kitchens, on the subway, watched the 43-second clip again and again, incredulous, moved to tears, some openly weeping in front of their screens as they realized that yes, despite everything they had been led to believe, despite the corruption, the money, the years of lies, democracy still possessed absolute weapons, weapons of terrifying power, when just one man, one single man, finally stood up and chose to use them. 6 months later, when Congress passed, by an overwhelming, near-unanimous vote, the law mandating the full, immediate, and utterly unredacted disclosure of every single Epstein file, no exceptions, no censorship, no blacked-out names, no redacted paragraphs. Political commentators, historians, columnists, and anchors across every network agreed on one single point. Everything had turned on one September afternoon in 2025, inside room 2140, one of the Rayburn House office building, in exactly 43 seconds flat. Those 43 seconds instantly became the founding moment of a new era of forced transparency, the irreversible tipping point where the Constitution finally overpowered the best-guarded secrets of the state. The following year, constitutional law textbooks officially added the Massie precedent, the perfect, ultimate, absolute example of how the speech or debate clause, 6 words nearly forgotten by everyone, can be turned into a nuclear weapon against the most deeply entrenched. Institutional corruption. The victims, women and men who had waited decades, finally saw the names of their abusers appear in full, unhidden, on screens, in newspapers, on official government websites. Some wept in front of their televisions until they were spent. Others collapsed to their knees. Some sat frozen for hours, unable to believe it was finally real. Many wrote letters to Thomas Massie, long, handwritten pages, sometimes tear-stained, and one of them, the woman with a faint scar on her temple whom the entire country had watched stand and applaud that day, took a plane, showed up unannounced at his Washington office, walked in, said not a word, went straight to him, and held him in a long, crushing embrace while the staff looked away so as not to intrude on the moment. Massie refused every triumphant interview, every magazine cover, every primetime invitation. Whenever a microphone was thrust toward him, he simply repeated, calmly, almost shyly, "I only did my job. The Constitution did the rest." The Republican Party, torn apart from within, took years to recover from the explosion. Some members never did. Their political careers ended in disgrace or oblivion. Others quietly left public life. Still others spent the rest of their days trying to explain why they had fled the room that afternoon. Humiliated, the FBI rewrote every protocol governing sensitive files and sexual crimes involving public figures. The Department of Justice, within a month, created a permanent transparency unit dedicated to high-level sex crimes, with its own budget and expanded investigative powers, and in law schools around the world, from Harvard to Oxford, Tokyo to Sao Paulo, professors now screen the 43-second clip in lecture halls as the precise, exact moment when one man, armed only with 6 words of the Constitution, proved that no wall, no matter how thick, how armored, how shielded by decades of privilege and money, can withstand someone who finally stands up and speaks the truth aloud. Years later, when he was asked in a rare interview whether he had truly been prepared to read the names, one by one, before the entire nation, Thomas Massie answered simply, without hesitation, without excess pride, just with the quiet certainty that had always defined him, "I never had to do it. The threat was enough." But everyone knew, deep down, that if it had come to it, he would have done it, name after name, word after word, slowly, clearly, without flinching for a single second, because sometimes, in a democracy, the greatest power, the most terrifying power, the purest power does not belong to presidents, intelligence agencies, billionaires, or lobbyists. It belongs to one lone man standing at a microphone, shielded by 6 words written 250 years ago in a candlelit room. For any speech or debate, they shall not be questioned. And on that day, September 18th, 2025, at exactly 3:47 and 34 seconds p.m., Thomas Massie reminded the entire world that those 6 words can still make the mighty tremble in 43 seconds, that sometimes 43 seconds are enough to change history forever, to finally deliver justice to those who had been sworn to silence, and to restore a deep, almost religious faith to tens of millions of ordinary people who had come to believe the system was rotten to the core. No, it was not completely not. As long as there remained one man, just one, willing to stand up, open his mouth, and speak.